Broach the topic. I'm Coach Mai, and this is.
I didn't know we was doing that. Hold on.
You the one that told me at first I wasn't.
Nah. I knew we was getting started, and I put it on you to tell you to let's get started. But I didn't know we was going with nicknames, right? Coach Mai. That's where we're gonna go with this.
Maisha.
Coach Maisha. Okay. I was just gonna go with David. I didn't, but you know what? That's
good with that. I'm good with you going with David.
Okay, MacBook Air microphone. Okay, now we good. You can still hear me?
Yep.
Welcome to Broach the Topic. I'm Coach Broach. I want to be fancy too. So I'm Coach Broach. I don't know if I'm gonna be Coach Dave. I don't know if I'm gonna be Coach David. I don't know if I'm gonna be Coach Broach. Coach Dave. Coach Dave sounds good. I don't know. Right now, I'm just going to go with David. Is that good?
Yes.
All right. So I don't know if I'm going to call you Coach Maisha. How are you?
Good.
I like your name. Your name is special to me. I don't want to call you anything else right now.
What does it mean?
If you're not
Swahili
busy.
Means life.
Say what?
Swahili, it means life.
It means life. It gives me life. Do you know what my name means?
David?
Yeah.
The man after God's own heart?
No, that was a different David. Do you know what my name actually means?
David?
Yeah.
Warrior.
No. Close, though. I'm going to tell you why. David actually means beloved. And Marcel means little warrior. I'm not nobody little nothing, but... All right, good. So listen. So let's go ahead and just get started. So you had an experience that I wasn't a part of. You had an opportunity to go to a conference, a learning, a gathering, a teaching, and you were sharing with me that something good came out of it. So just wanted an opportunity for you to give you an opportunity to share what some of your thoughts were. Let me know what's going on.
So I think for Broach the topic today, a good topic would be talking about emotional needs. I know for me, this week, I have really been focusing on it. And I didn't know why. I think it's just the spirit bearing witness that this is an area that I needed to dig into, to lean into. And I was looking at Earl Nightingale earlier this week, you know that. And It was, what was it called? The Secret of, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. But it was about 45 minutes or so and really talking about being intentional and talking about, what a man thinketh so is he. Basically, that is the secret. It was called The Strangest Secret. That was what was
The
called.
Strangest Secret?
The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale.
Okay.
And, of course, stuff that I've always heard, as a man thinketh, so is he, giving practical steps on what we can do to, move from point A to point B. And, I was never a type of person that thought that I had a issue with emotions until I got married to you somehow, but it was never something that was really brought to my attention. I just did what I did, said what I said, and it was what it was. Let the chips fall where they may, right?
Okay, so the married to me part, that was a good thing, or where are you going with this?
No, I think it was absolutely a good thing, but emotions do impact marriages, and I don't think
I bring out I bring out, certain emotions out of you, or like,
Yeah, I
I don't know.
mean,
I'm triggered right now. I don't really know how to take this. I need some emotional intelligence myself right now to digest what you just said to me.
well, when you get married, you don't, a lot of us, when we get married, we don't think about really our emotional state. I
Hmm.
don't know, sometimes that is, something that, how can I say it? When we are deciding, making the decision to become one with someone,
Hmm.
it matters if that person is healthy or unhealthy,
Absolutely.
right? Emotionally. And
Absolutely.
sometimes we get into marriages, and once we're in it, we realize some of the emotional issues, I would say, can spring up. And unless somebody, it has to be somebody mature in the marriage, has to be somebody mature to be able to be patient. I think that both parties have to be healthy, in order to make the marriage work. And I don't know if a lot of people take that time to really focus in this area. We focus on spiritual, we focus on everything else, and we really kind of leave our emotions to chance.
Listen,
So,
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that, only because you brought up marriage, I don't think a lot of people are focusing on, making themselves whole before, and learning of themselves before they get married, period. Whether
right,
it's emotional, I mean, physical, financial, whatever the case may be, people just go into that whole thing blind. But,
right.
what made me, what when you were speaking, what came to my mind is our favorite Russian. I don't know if I should say that. I don't know if he's Russian or Yugoslavian. The gentleman on YouTube, the
Vladimir.
ma'am,
What's his name? Vladimir?
Vlad. Yeah, yeah, Vlad. Vlad is my guy. I love that, Vlad. But he made this statement when he was talking about when you're married. Remember the example he had with the cups. And he was like, you had a cup of water, and he had the guy bump into it, and it spilled the cup of water. He says, when you're married, you can be angry at your spouse for always bumping into you and spilling your water. When the reality is that you were carrying around this water the whole time anyway, and the water, of course, represented baggage and emotional deficiencies and areas of your life that hadn't been matured properly, and strongholds that you held. The cup represented all of that. And because you're now in close proximity of one another, we can't help walking the same path together, except every now and then bump into each other. And when I bump into you, it makes you spill your water, but it brings to your attention that that water exists. Right.
Right.
And it gives you the opportunity to work on it, and vice versa. There's been a lot of things I've grown tremendously. I'm not going to say it in such a backhanded way that you did.
Oh
But
my goodness.
but since we've been married, I feel that I have grown tremendously in a positive, let me
Yeah.
be clear, direction, because of the fact that in order for me to manage you properly, I had no
Right.
choice but to address some of these emotional things that I didn't even know existed.
That's
So,
good. That's good. And it's true, right? I think that now I want to kind of shift gears a little bit because you touched on something really, really, I think would be helpful for the listeners, and that is managing your triggers while trying to support someone in theirs,
mhm.
right? So, not to get too personal with us, but that was, I mean, the first year was very impactful for both of us, right? We were both seasoned in age. 40, I won't say is, we're not old, but we lived life before we came together. So we had our habits, our proclivities, we had, different ways of looking at things, parenting, how we did everything, right? Because we did things on our own for the most part for a long time. And then coming together, and trying to balance everything, it was a challenge, would you say, for the first year?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
First years are always hard, but um, I'm gonna go ahead and say, normally I don't specify that, for us, you keep it
mhm.
general because everybody goes through it. But I think no, uniquely for us, it was difficult. I
Yeah,
think that I think that God, who is a redeemer of time,
Mm-hmm.
right, did a huge thing in a short period of time in our lives to prepare us to get to the next level. So I think we went through, although we didn't meet each other and get together, and like you said, until our young age of 40,
Right.
right, until we were there, and I was a little older, but but the bottom line is that I think we made up for it. So, for instance, had we got married at 30, that 10 years worth of wisdom that we would have had by the time that we hit 40, I think we had a crash course. We had an intensive therapy session during the courting stage, and the first year of our marriage. Not just, it was very therapeutic, not just on us learning each other, but more importantly on us growing so that we could be better for the next person. Because it wasn't me, I'm not managing you. It's not me telling you, you got to do this different, you got to do that different, but more so it's me being willing to submit to God and change and grow myself so that I can be supportive to you, based off of the things that you're bringing to my attention. And hopefully when I bring things to your attention, you take it not personally in a negative way, but you recognize it and work at it, and we go from there. We're working on that.
Yeah, well, it's
Like at the beginning of this call when you tried to take that shot at me, but it's cool.
for them shots. But I want to stay on this topic of triggers, because I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
it is very important that we talk to people about triggers, because sometimes we really don't understand why we do the things that we do. Why do we respond the way we respond? And because it seems so natural, innate, right? That we think that's just who we are, when actually God may be preparing us to be someone who we haven't seen, a higher version of ourselves, right? And the emotional topic, I think, is very, very important, because you don't want to just exist, right? And I think for a long time, I've just been existing. It's like, not really managing my emotions, but more importantly, not really doing a check on how I actually feel. Like, how do you feel? I don't want, somebody will ask you, well, how do you feel? You're like, I'm great. Well, I'm doing okay. And
I
I'm
was
not
lying, right?
okay. Like,
Yeah.
so really just kind of doing that pulse check and saying, how does Maisha feel today? We really don't take that time to do that. So I'm finding myself, now that I am being intentional, I'm asking myself, why am I triggered by that? What is causing me to respond and react this way? And
Right.
I don't pass 9 out of 10 times right now, because I'm just starting this. But really kind of looking in and saying, okay, this person said this to me. I can choose to create a narrative in my head about why they said this, or I can simply say, what did you mean by that?
Isn't it
You know,
crazy? Like 100% correct what you said, but isn't it crazy, right? It's easier theoretically, right? Just on a practical level, it should be easier to say, what did you mean by that situation? Or when I heard this, what did you mean? And then let you tell me what you really meant. And then I respond accordingly, right? As opposed to just make up an imaginary story. It's and connected to stuff from my past. It's probably this. I had experience in my past where this happened. It reminds me of that. So it's probably this, and this, and the whole nine. And then I respond as if it's that thing in my head, and the other person don't even know that's what I'm doing and where I'm coming from. And we got to go through this whole merry-go-round process. So it's weird, because I'm going to ask you the question, why is it that the easy thing is the road often less traveled?
I think that it is a matter of, do you really want to know what the person's going to say?
Fear.
Fear. I can only speak for me, but I think that's what it is for the most part. You already feel, based off of the example that you're providing right now, you already feel some type of way, right? So if you feel that way, the road less traveled is to come up with a story and not allow the person to either say you're absolutely right for why you feel horrible because I meant it that way, or now that it doesn't align with the story you created, I don't believe what you say out your mouth anyway.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like
It's a recipe for
that
disaster.
person is at a disadvantage one way or the other,
Right.
right? And I think that's why it's definitely fears, rejection. It is, I feel this way. I'm justified in feeling this way. And no matter what that person says, I believe they meant it this way.
Right. Which can be, if I'm not mistaken, number one, responding that way is the trigger, meaning I've always responded this way in situations like this. So I'm going to do what's comfortable. I'm going to do what's familiar. I'm going to always respond this way, not even realizing that it's not even about the topic or the situation that took place. But the reason why I'm responding this way is, as a matter of self-protection, because if in the past it served me well to respond this way, whether that be running, whether that be pushing somebody away, or, if I can, cut to the chase, assume what it is, protect myself, then you can't hurt me anymore. And I'm in control of the situation, even though, it could cause an outcome, when it comes to a relationship that I don't necessarily want.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a self-sabotage behavior if we think about it, right?
It is.
But because of the lack of self-awareness, where everyone is existing this way, it takes a special person to really say, and I don't say because everybody is special, so I'm saying this can be for anyone if they so choose to accept the challenge, is to really look at yourself. And I know that, for the past 3 years, I prayed a prayer and I was like, Lord, reveal me to me. And when I prayed that prayer, I didn't know what I was praying, right? Because when he started taking me through some challenges and I started seeing myself, I did not like myself. And he kind of, how you look at yourself one way and you thinking you're presenting yourself in a way. And then when somebody else looks at you, they don't think of you that same way. And you're wondering why. It's because you don't, you're not a mirror, right? So sometimes you look at everybody else, but you don't take the time to really understand or focus on you and why people react and respond the way that they do to you. Right? You think it's everybody else, or it could be they hate, or they don't like me, or it could be everything else, but it could be some of your self-sabotaging behaviors that's causing this, and why people look and see you the way that they see you. And that was hard. That was a really difficult pill to swallow for me.
Yeah. I know, I can imagine. I agree. I share the sentiments. It's interesting though, because we started off talking about marriage, and I think that a marriage is one of the few relationships that enable us to be able to, see ourselves correctly, if that makes sense, right? Okay. So, we can go through our entire life and everybody can have an opinion over this person, that they're short, or they're short-tempered, or they're nasty even, or they're, and you never see it because you're looking at your heart. Like, in my heart, that's not what I'm doing. That's not what I mean. That's not who I'm trying to be, or whatever the case may be. But then when you get into that relationship, that marriage, that oneness, where that transparency, and you get into that scenario where, just the physical aspect of it, right? I don't see myself even physically. Right. You see me physically more. If I'm not standing in front of a mirror, and even that's a reflection, you see me, I see you. So it stands to reason that you see my blind spots easier, faster, quicker, more clearer than I see my own blind spots, and vice versa. And then when it comes to that marriage situation, the person who loves you, how can you stand there? You love somebody, you see that deficiency, it's self-sabotaging, and you don't love them enough to help them out and to kindly and gently nudge them and tell them, hey, I don't think this is right. I think you need to look at it differently, or whatever the case may be. So that whole process of being what we talked about earlier, that first year, that first 5 years can be a fight, because sometimes they're reflecting, because my wife is, you're a reflection of me and I'm a reflection of you. And sometimes we don't oftentimes like that reflection that we see back. And it causes us to fight ourselves and the other person unnecessarily.
I agree with that. So let's talk about that a little bit more, right? Because marriage is a blessing. It also is a blessing when two people are whole. And I think it's a lot of, why marriages don't work, or it's a lot of work, right? You have to put in the time, you got to put in the effort. And I know one time you said to me, love is a choice. And I'm like, I see that. I didn't understand what you meant by it. Mm-hmm. As I continue to mature, though, in our marriage, I'm starting to understand that, because commitment is doing what you said you would do long after the mood you set it in has left you. So there are times when I just don't like you. There are times when you just don't like me. And, but we gonna be real, right? Sometimes I just get on your nerves. And I think that when you talk about a marriage and oneness, you mentioned and alluded to how you can see a flaw in someone, but sometimes you're like, I don't even want to deal with the fight,
the fallout,
argument. I don't want to keep, I don't want to keep exposing this to this person, because unless the person is receptive, it goes on deaf ears. And let's talk about a little bit about that with us, because you faced that with me, some of my flaws. And I looked at you as if you were criticizing me. I was not receptive to your feedback. As a matter of fact, I believe that the devil works in marriages, and it's a spiritual warfare. But when you were communicating those things to me, I was pulling away from you, and I felt like I could not be myself with you, because, of course, you're going to see me, no makeup, just who I am, unapologetically me, right? And then I was finding myself saying, well, I can't be myself around you. So let's talk about that. When you have a spouse who you see things that they don't see, but you want to help them, but it's a very thin line from you helping and correcting, being supportive. How, as a man, as a husband, to a wife that is supposed to submit to a man that is correcting her, what advice would you give, and how you have delicately managed me in this season, because it's not over?
Yeah, there's so many ways. It's a great question, and there's so many ways to answer that, and not too many ways to do it and be short-winded at the same time. I don't want to be too long-winded here, but here's the first thing that comes to my mind is, and it's some people take this as an offense, but when the Bible says for a man to be gentle and careful with his wife as she is the weaker vessel, right? A lot of times that's taken in a negative connotation, and I don't think that it should be. And I don't think that it's always limited to, sometimes we dumb it down and say physically he has more testosterone, muscles, mass, he's stronger. I don't think that's really what it meant either. But I think men and women are built differently in how we process emotions, how we process logic, how we move forward. And the reality is that I need you. So one is not better than the other, but we have to be sensitive to the differences that the other one possesses of viewing it. So for instance, I was at a men's conference not too long ago, last weekend, as a matter of fact. And one of the things that we were talking about was pressure, and the pressure that men have to carry on their shoulders, right? So the pressure to be a provider, whether you make as much, more than, less than, have a job, don't have a job, you're still responsible for being the provider, still responsible for being the protector, still responsible for being the spiritual leader within the household. And then you have your own emotional problems that you're dealing with. And sometimes you feel like I can't talk to her about what I'm experiencing emotionally for when I try. She doesn't understand. And then on top of it, she has her emotional problems that she's coming to me, and I'm now responsible for mine and taking care of her at the same time. And we walk around with all of this weight on our backs as far as this pressure. And one of the things that I think was so freeing is the pastor who was speaking at that time looked at all of the men in the audience. It was about 800 to 1,000 of us at that time. And he made just a proclamation that is so simple. You're wired differently than she is, right? So you don't be frustrated when you try to explain to her how you feel from your perspective. She'll never see it from your perspective. She only has the ability to see it from hers. Right. So if you free her from that understanding, you don't have to have that expectation, then you can move on to the next level, and do it. So for me, it's been a matter of sensitivity, to, in a lot of ways, sensitivity to God, to go to God first and not allow your flesh and logic and what mama did and what daddy did and what you saw and how the culture tells you it's supposed to be, but wash it by the word. Be sensitive about how you go to her. And then when you go to her, patience, right? So I'm gonna stop here because this isn't mine, but I did hear a gentleman say that we always say, till death do you part when it comes to marriage, but nobody really talks about the fact that we get married at an altar. Right. We come to, in most cases, it's an altar. Even if it's a made up altar, it's an altar that we come to when we say our vows. Right. Well, historically, what do you do at altars? At altars is where you sacrifice animals. Right. Altar is where you go to die. Right. So it's not till death do us part when we get old, but rather marriage is just like it's parallel to our relationship with Christ, right? For I'm crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet it's not me, but God, Christ that walks in me. I have to die daily for Christ. And similarly, this marriage parallels that relationship. You have to die daily for your spouse. You have to die to your expectations. You have to die to your wants. You have to die and the reason why I say you have to literally die to yourself in exchange for the oneness. That's the only way that you can perpetually forgive. Because marriage is just, like, if you don't know how to forgive in your heart before you get married, you will after you've been married, because every day you are presented with the opportunity or the demand to forgive in love over and over and over and over and over again. So for any man listening to this, the answer to that question is you have to be willing to die to Christ. You have to be willing to die for your marriage in exchange for the oneness in both sides of the relationships, oneness with Christ and oneness with your wife. And you have to be patient and willing to forgive often. So that conversation could happen 25 times a month, right? And you have to be willing to go through it because it's not going to click until it clicks, but she's worth it. She's worth the effort of going through it, no matter how long it takes. Just as you would expect her, because all of us men, we have so much on our shoulders. We're going through a lot. And although we present ourselves in strength, most of us are jacked up. And these women love us and they're patient with us. It's in society, it's acceptable for the woman to be patient. But when we talk about a man doing it, it borders that sensitivity and all that kind of stuff. It's a requirement. We have to be patient. You have to love. And, that's how I see it.
So can I have your permission to ask some more questions? So,
I didn't know this was an interview, but sure.
I know it turned into it, but let me ask you this. You mentioned a lot, started with us and thank you for being patient with me, because I will say that, there has been some instances where, you have had to kind of step in and understand that it really wasn't me. Like, you speak over me in a way when you talk about washing me with the word, and at the time I don't want to hear it, and because I'm in my feelings at the time, and you find that way of making sure that God stays in the conversation. I think that dispelled a lot of our arguments, actually, to the point that it disarmed me with an argument. So men, spiritual men, you might want to wash your wife with the word, and maybe it'll keep our mouths shut at that time and allow y'all to kind of, make amends But I do want to ask you about how you were saying over time in relationships, marriages specifically, since I think this is a sweet spot, a good lane to be in right now. I want to bring up and still tying it into emotional health of both husband and wife. There is a level of maturity you have to have, the husband has to have, the wife has to have. But what about offense? You know, I know that in the Bible it says how, the disciples were asking, how many times do I have to forgive? And Jesus said 70 times 7 a day, right? And literally, when you are with someone as much as you are, whether it's a living together relation, any type of relationship, there are going to be misunderstandings. There are going to be times when you are offended. How do you manage through the offense? Because I remember for me, I would be offended with you. I would retreat. I would wait a couple of days. I would have already had stories in my head. I would come to you and I would think that I was coming to you in peace, but it turned into arguments. So it never really solved anything because those same things were kind of like piling up, like every story kind of related to the other one. And so on my part, I was not forgiving 70 times 7 because then I wouldn't have been creating all of these stories relating to each other, right? Because I would always say, well, you always do this. Or I would say, I remember when you did this, which is similar to what you're doing now. So you did it. Like this is you. Relationship and not stay offended because I know that that's the bait of Satan, right? So let's talk about that.
So, man, so here's where I pause, right? So I'm thinking, how can I answer this question non-biblically, right? And the reason why I'm saying that is because what if somebody is not, a Christian and they're not and they're married? Certain marriages still work, but how would they move through it? And it's, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. So my mind went in that direction, but I'm gonna say how I do it, right? So for me, it's hard. For me, it's been one of the most difficult things to do, right? So I'm going to say, and I'm not going to speak in generalities, but, for all men, but a lot of us, right? When I know all I'm trying to do is help, or I know, so a lot of people do dirty stuff, they make mistakes and things like that. But for those of us that's doing right, one of the hardest things in the world is to be accused of something when I ain't did it, right? You know what I mean? Because we're thinking she don't understand how hard it is for me to stand up as an upright man in society anyway. And then instead of receiving appreciation, I'm getting the attack, right? And then when I try to explain, like, no, you're hitting me with, yes, you did. I know it. You always this, you always that. Most men withdraw.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. I can't respond to you the way I would respond to another guy. Right. That's not going to go well. Right. You're clearly not listening to me and don't want to hear anything that I have to say. So why am I talking? Go ahead and believe what you want to believe. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And then you find yourselves in those situations where, stereotypically men don't talk, women are over talking, there's no communication and they shut down and things of that nature. And I can say that because I feel the inclination. I understand that why men would do that. I don't do that too much, right? I may get quiet and excuse myself for a moment to collect my thoughts. I may have those moments where, you know what? And here's the crazy part. This is the flesh talking, right? You know what? I know that I have to go fix this. I know that she's worth fixing this. I know I'm gonna go fix this. I know as the man of this household, I'm not gonna allow this to go on for too much longer. But right now, I don't feel like it. So right now, I'm going to walk past her. I'm not going to say nothing. Right now, I'm going to, you know what I mean? And that's when God kicks me in my tail. Right. So for me, it's different because I'm not even, and I'm just going to be honest, I'm not even seeking God saying, hey, help me with this. God is not allowing me to fail at it. God is grabbing me, turning me around, jerking me up, shaking me and looking me. And he's literally reminding me all the time. I mean, it'll be something ridiculous. You and I are in the house and there's an offense or whatever the case may be. He'll take me back to college. He'll take me back to high school. He'll take me back to when I was 21 years old. He'll take me back and say, do you remember when you did this? It don't have nothing to do with what happened, right? It doesn't even, the two examples don't even mesh. But he says, when you did this, it made me feel this way. He'll remind me, no matter how I feel about you, I can feel that you don't respect me. I can feel that you're accusing me of this, or I can feel that you, whatever the case may be. I can feel that I can't trust you. I can feel that you're not dependable. I can feel whatever the emotion is. God will put me into a position in which I made him feel that way about me. I made him feel, or I acted in a way that he can look at me and say, David's not trustworthy. David's not dependable. David's not being respectful. David's not being obedient, or whatever the case may be. And literally, I mean, I promise you, this is how I see it. He reminds me or immediately of a situation in which I made him feel that way. And then he immediately says, and how did I love you? How did I handle you in that situation? Did I scream at you at the top of my lungs? Did I walk past you and ignore you and abandon you? Did I say, forget you? I don't want a relationship with you. Did I cause harm to you? How did I love you through it? He says, and that's how I want you to love her. Right? So it goes back to that, love your wife as Christ loves the church as a man. And then that's where my flesh kicks in, because now I know the answer. I know what I have to do. My whole flesh is screaming, no, I don't want to do it. It's not fair. It doesn't feel good. I don't like it. Right? But now I have to die daily. I have to submit to God, and I have to go and forgive anyway. And that's that perpetual forgiveness that I talked about earlier, because when God forgives us, he separates our sins as far as the east is from the west, to remember them no more. So as a man, I can't even go to you and say, you always do this. That's not a language that you hear from me on a regular basis, even though what you're doing might be a cycle that happens every month, or whatever the case may be. But I have to respond in that same way. I don't hold those bygones. I have to forgive. I have to love anyway. It doesn't feel good. But again, how I treat you is as a service unto him. And that has to be priority number one for us.
So we still, I know we said that we were going to cut this short, and we still may have to break this up. But I think that you, again, emotional health, right? We're still on this topic, but things impact us, whether our pastor said today that, the devil works on us early, right at infancy. He prepares us, or has us go through situations where we know that we need people and we are interdependent on people, but he will, create situations, relationships that are so damaging that it makes you not want to deal with people, right? And you look back over your life and it was just a setup, because you need people, right? You can't make it in this world. God intended us for us to be of service to others, right? So now I'm going to take it back to where you were talking about, and thank you for talking about the offense, because I'm living proof that you forgive me daily. I will, I'm not going to tell on myself, but you're pretty patient. I appreciate it. I know that, we can talk about it a little deeper if you ever decide to. You can, explore it, but not right now.
Don't know what you're talking.
But I do want to explore something, and this may get personal. And please feel free to be candid. Okay? You talked about respect. Okay? And this is a topic that we deal with and are dealing with. And I think that it's important for us to talk about it if we're going to show who we really are. I think that this is something that a lot of people deal with in relationships and in marriage, respect. And I remember recently telling you that respect to you may not look the same to me. We can't always assume that respect is what we think it is. So, for example, I may have grown up and thought respect was if I'm not cursing you out, if I'm not putting my hands on you, if I'm not walking out the house and not coming back home, if I am not disrespecting you by doing things that to me are blatant, that you can't say that I'm disrespecting you because I don't understand what you mean. However, your version of disrespect is I feel dismissed. I don't feel acknowledged. I feel that when I'm talking to you right now, you're not listening and you're not acknowledging me in a way to resolve this issue, right? So I would like for us to talk about, how important it is to be respected as a man. And then I want to give my take on it as a woman, because especially nowadays, right? Women, we feel that we are just as significant in the marriage as the man. I know that there are going to be some people that are in their early stages of marriage and that are seasoned. And that respect word is, well, if that person don't respect me, I'm not going to respect them. And especially for women, like, well, why should I respect him if this, that? When God commands us to respect you, and God commands a man to love his wife. And we were just reading a book called Love and Respect, right? And it is controversial in some instances because he's really getting on a woman, in my opinion. But he makes a lot of sense. He talked about the crazy cycle. It was Dr. Eggerson, right? I think he's the doctor. But very, very good book. We're still reading it. So tell me, what in a man's version does respect look like to you?
Okay, so that's not the question I thought you was going to ask, but so here's what I'm going to say as a disclaimer before I answer this. Right, this is a whole nother pod type of discussion, right? We've been on this for 42 minutes, right? We're going to end up having to do an entirely new pod specifically about respect, because you can't talk about God's commandment for a wife to respect or reverence her husband without talking about the husband's responsibility to love his wife as Christ loves as the church, right? You can't separate them. They're tied to one another, right? They're married to one another. So I'm not going to go tremendously deep in it, right? But you're right when you say that the perspectives of what is respect, what respect looks like, is just as vast as when it comes to the differences as far as when you compare it to love. If you were to ask 10 different people, what is love? You're going to get a whole bunch of different answers. And some of those things are going to make you cringe because that ain't love. You know what I mean?
Or my version of it at that.
Yeah. Right. And then some people's answers, when you say, oh, this is love, you're going to be like, I don't know if that's love. That's indentured servant. That's
right.
You can go way too far. Right. So I think Christ is our measuring stick on that. But I think earlier when we were talking, we talked about how men and women, we just have to deal with the reality that is men and women are wired differently.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So men are wired to demand and give respect. So the Bible actually says that we are both to submit one into another. Right. But the woman's submission gets magnifying glass goes on it as if it's something negative, but we're supposed to submit to each other. The Bible does ask a woman to respect her husband. And the one thing I did glean out of the book that you're referring to, and so far it is a good book, and so far it does lean more on the women. I agree with you. We got more of the book. Maybe it's going to flip. I felt that way too. But a couple of the points that he made that I thought at the very, very, very beginning were Come on, Ace. All right, I'm sorry. So, the very, very beginning was that men are wired differently. Women are wired differently. So women are wired to love, right? Women have that maternal instinct in them when they see a baby, whether it's theirs or otherwise. Women, even when they greet each other and they have an argument with your girlfriend and y'all piece it up, y'all hugging it out and all this kind of stuff. Women love differently, right? I mean, they're wired to love. It's easier for them to love, right? On the flip side, not to say that they can't be respectful, but how they view respect is a little different. Men, on the other hand, we're not always the touchy-feely when you see a bunch of group of men together, you're liable to see a tug of war or some push-ups, before you're going to see a whole bunch of hugs. That's just the way that, we're not wired that way. But you go to a barbershop and you're going to see men, even when we're talking trash back and forth with each other, how we talk and how far we go, we're not going to cross that line of respect. I've seen with some of my brothers, some of my friends, we could actually be with each other and could put hands on each other, right? And piece that up. Right? Which is, seems a little weird. But if I use my mouth to cut you in a disrespectful way, we may never rebound from that. Right? Because we value respect differently. So I think when it comes to marriage, that's where that communion, where we have to really have those conversations. Because, like I said earlier, you're looking at me and I'm looking at you. I'm learning of you. So I have to learn how you love, because you're going to love differently than anyone else, right? And then separately for me, you have to learn from me what I look at as respect. For me personally, respect, had the big ways that you identified that, of course, can be considered disrespectful, but it's the small inferences on respect where you have to, it's disrespect. It's dismissing somebody. It's disregarding somebody. If you're talking, I'm going to listen to what you say, even if I disagree with what you say. I'm going to respond to what you say, go down that rabbit hole, let you know that I disagree, and then I'm going to share. I'm not going to just completely disregard everything you said and throw it away as if, pretend like you don't even exist, like you wasn't even standing in front of me. I just dismissed you as a human being. To me, that feels ridiculous. But, we've had situations in which I felt that way from you. Not to say that that's how you even responded. It could be that you was just so focused on your point. It doesn't mean that you was thinking that. But if I'm talking to you and you say, I think it's such and such, and I come back and be like, yeah, I can understand that. But I might even be, dress mine up and say, but can I offer you a different position? Could it possibly be that blah, 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 blah? And then you don't even respond to what I say. You go back to, like I said, I think it's such and such. I'm sitting there like, am I here? Like, am I even, like, I'm looking around like, what's going on? I'm missing something here, right? And it can quickly become, I feel, disrespected, especially in a situation in which as a man, we can be like, there's nobody else on this planet that can talk to me that way. Right. Regardless of how I respond to it, it could be that I respond physically, aggressively, whatever. It can be that I just quick to just cut you off. I'm not going to give you access to my life. With my wife, I can do neither. So there's nobody on this planet that I'm going to allow to continually do it. You know what I mean? So you're the only one. So now you're bumping into me. It's spilling that glass. It's showing that I have that issue. And we have to merge a little bit, because I can't be so rigid, the way what they do politics. They got left wing and right wing. I can't be so right wing with mine that this is the highway, the only way. And just like with you, when it comes to the love, I may not have looked at it that way. We have to find a way to come to the middle with it. But I think we're going to discuss this. We have to have a conversation specifically about it, and we have to go in depth about it. And we are, like you said, going to have to be a little transparent and share some examples so that everybody can understand, because I think this is something that everybody deals with and nobody is really talking about. And it's that silent killer. And
vulnerability. Like, you have to be vulnerable to, and again, back to the emotional health piece, because if I can't see what you see, if I'm not self-aware, right? It wasn't until I started saying, wait a minute, this is starting to be a recurring theme that he's saying I'm disrespecting him. Now, Maisha, what are you doing that could make him feel that way? Do you care enough to take a deeper dive to find out why? You don't agree because I did not agree with you because I thought disrespect was something else. So the little nuances that I thought were trivial to me were monumental for you. And I think that that right there deals with emotional needs not being met or us really
Oh,
not focusing on, why do we behave the way we behave?
nah, you're 100% correct. I laughed because when you said that, it
Laughing
kind
at
of
me.
goes. I'm not, but it's like
Laughing at me.
it goes both ways. Like, because and I'm going to exaggerate this on purpose, but it's like I can go to the kitchen and get me something to drink or make me a plate, and then come back and sit down, and I didn't bring, for instance, you a plate. And I'm going to exaggerate this, but you sitting there like maybe I don't belong here. Maybe he doesn't love me. I don't feel like, and I'm like, what? I just hungry. You ate a little while ago, like so.
No, but when we was dating and courting, you wouldn't even came out that kitchen
I mean,
without a plate.
I'm saying
But
though.
but 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 but,
Yeah,
but
yeah, 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 yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's
Working.
like, okay, so I'm looking at some things, and that's where you creating the stories, but
Yeah.
then offense
Right.
sets in. You know what I mean? Oh well, that he didn't do that before. Oh, this is what, and you are building a story, and sometimes people get to the point of no return. I want to help people make sure that when they feel that they're not at that point of return. Have hope and know that God is in control of everything. He can fix anything,
Right.
right? And we just have to do the work. We have to do the work and not just settle for good enough or I'm getting by. What type of life do I want to live? And that's where I am at 44. Like, do I really want the peace that surpasses all understanding? What does that look like? Like,
I'm
what
trying to
is
see what that
joy
be like.
unspeakable look like? What
Cool.
does a thriving marriage that I've never ever seen, that I'm trying to create, what does that look like when you have no model for it? Right? And so I think that it is worth talking about because it doesn't just happen. I think it's exposed when you get into relationships. And some people don't put in the work and they be like, I'm out. Like for me, I used to be out. I'm running for the door. Like I'm not trying to figure nothing out. You hurt me. I might communicate to you once or twice, try to stick it out, but I'm out. Like emotionally checked out. And then I'm looking for an out. So that's how I used to be. I'm not
Yeah,
that
and I
way
heard that word
anymore.
used. I didn't caught you at the door on a couple of occasions though. So I know, but we growing. We
So
growing.
you know what I'm talking about though. But that was because of fear,
I
right?
understand.
It's a
Yeah.
reason for that. It's a reason like I don't want to deal with this pain. I don't want to deal with the pain of having someone else come into my life and there's a potential that this person can hurt me. No, I'm gonna have one up. I'm gonna protect me and I'm gonna make sure I'm okay because they're gonna make sure they okay. That's what I've experienced before getting married though. I believe that it is absolutely a difference. And I think so many people look at relationships, well, look at marriages like relationships that they can just jump in and jump out. Hence the, prenuptials and all that other stuff. And I'm sure that some people can argue the fact that, yeah, if I'm established, I'm going to do this to protect myself.
Hence
But
the
when
divorce
you
rate
get into
spirit.
a marriage,
Yeah.
it's sad.
Regardless of the prenuptials and the money, just the fact that the divorce rates are as high as they are anyway, people
Yeah,
are not taking it as serious as it's supposed to be taken. They're
exactly.
looking at it as a relationship, not a covenant agreement. God's not in the middle of it, so they're not breaking His heart, and then their heart is not broken. They're just on to the next. So we're going to be the
Good
difference
stuff.
makers. We're going to be the
Good
difference
stuff.
makers. So, beloved, I'm going to allow you the opportunity to close us out as we're coming up on an hour here. And we're going, live to pot another day.
All right. Well, I think that to wrap up, Emotional needs are like super important. I think that we should have self-awareness of what we're feeling. Don't be afraid to get help. There are several people that are going through the same thing. You are not alone. And if you do not know God as your personal savior, this is a personal invite. Come and get to know the man that can change all things, anything that is going on in your life. You know, you give it to him and he's going to be there to take care of you. So that's all I have. That's
Got
all I
it. Got
have.
it. Love you, and then we'll talk.
All right. Love you too.
All right.
See ya.